If you have goals in life that you haven't hit yet, and you really need a system to make sure you do, you're in the right place. My name is Byron Woodson from Keystone Organizing Systems, and you can achieve all of your goals with the Imagine, Create, Execute system. It is as easy as 139. You take one goal at a time, you break it into 3 stages, and then you follow the 9 steps, and you will achieve that goal. Now, my big promise to you is that you will, following this system, you will do all of the critical things right, which will cause your success. And you will do them in the right order. And this will help you save time and avoid setbacks. And because you save time and avoid setbacks, and you do things in the right order, you'll achieve more of your goals faster than you think. Now, to get the most out of this, what I want you to do is think of one particular thing that you want to get accomplished. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the elements you need to create a fail-proof plan to achieve your goal in 30 days or less. Now, it might take you years to achieve this goal. It might take you months, or hey, it might take you 10 days. But whatever the case, you will have all of the elements you need to make sure that you achieve your goal. Will you have to change your plan? Probably. Will you have to adapt it if things change? Most likely. But you will have all of the big elements thought out and done, or thought out and thought through to make sure that you have everything you need to achieve your goal. Now, I said we have one goal, and then we break that goal into 3 stages. So the first stage is the imagine stage. What you do is you imagine something that benefits and inspires you. This might be you going to college, getting a new job. This might be you building a business. This might be you getting out in the dating scene or healing up from injury. You imagine something that benefits you and inspires you into action. Or it could be beneficial and inspiring for other people. You might share a few posts on your favorite social network. You might build a company centered around what somebody else needs to accomplish in life. As long as it benefits, inspires them, then we got something to work with. Next, what you're going to do is think about and create systems to fulfill in that vision. You can't just go from imagining something to action. You have to make sure that you do the right things and you get the right resources to make sure that you can do all of the things that you need to do. Yeah, it's a little complicated, but we're going to simplify it with this. And then once you have your system set up, you're going to execute the important actions better and faster. Because you have all your systems lined up, you can make sure that you don't have to keep going back and doing things over, going back and creating more systems or fixing the systems that you did wrong in the first place. You'll be able to execute the actions better and faster because they'll be lined up and you'll be able to knock them out one by one. Now, so that was the one goal. We have the 3 stages, and then we have the roadmap to get you there. We have all of the 9 steps. So the first step is design. You think about what it is that you want to accomplish. It's really that simple. Now, there's definitely requirements, there's values, there's the area of life it's in, but you have to make sure that you think about what it is that you want to accomplish. Then you go into the discover phase. And in the discover phase, what you do is you think about things you've done before, think about things that you could have done. You do research with other people, you do research on the internet, and you ask people what they've done in these types of situations, and you look for different solutions. And once you're done looking for different solutions, you're going to draft a particular plan that you want. So you'll see like the architectural diagram. You say, hey, there's all these options, but I want to do it this way. And that's all what you do in the imagine phase. And in the create phase, you start to actually build the system that you need. So imagine you're hungry, right? Uh, and, let's say you're hungry and you're on a desert island. You need to cook food. So you go hunt or go find some cactuses or something and you want to roast it. In order to cook the food, you need a system called fire. And what you do is you have to go get branches, leaves, and do the thing to make the fire. So the wood and the fire pit is the system that you need in order to create the fire in order to cook, right? So what you do is you organize your resources. You figure out what you need, when you need it, how much you need. Then you prioritize. You say, okay, what am I going to do first? What am I going to do second? And what am I going to do fifth? And then when you get to fifth, you realize you should have done what you were going to do next a couple of hours ago. And so what you have to do is you have to think through each step of your plan from beginning to end to make sure that you do everything in the right order. Remember I said that? And then once you have everything laid out in the right order, then you go build, because you don't want to start building something on a bad foundation. Then you have to get rid of the building, fix the foundation, and then put the building back. That's a lot of rework we want to avoid. So this, in the create phase, what you do is you look at all the systems that you have to put together to make sure that you have everything you need to achieve your goal. And then you do the execution. So in this cooking example, then you go get the food, right? After you have the fire assembled, then you go get the food. You put it on the plates, or, whatever sources you have. Maybe you suspend a rack from a tree. I don't know. Uh, and then what you do is you arrange all your tools and materials, and then you take them from storage, you put them into whatever system you need, and then boom, once they're out in your workspace, in your workplace, you use them and you take off. Now, that was one goal, 3 stages, 9 steps. Now, that's real quick, but then the question is, how are we going to get this? How are we going to get this applied to you? Really cool that I created a workbook for you. Ah, that's a lot of workbooks. There's 9 worksheets, one worksheet for each stage. And in each stage, there are 5 critical aspects of winning and succeeding at those stages that I've figured out. And we have questions for each of those to make sure that you go through the values, to make sure that you have the resources, the materials, the supplies, you have the workflow, you have the timing, you have the distribution, you have all of the things that you need. And instead of telling you this, do this, do this, do this over and over again, there are questions, because essentially what you have to do is answer the questions. If I just told you to do this, you'd have to do the mental work of saying, oh, okay, I go from here to there. But if I ask you the question, you're halfway done, because you know exactly how to fill in the blank. And if you don't, you can go do some research and get the answer, put it in your project plan, and then boom, you're off to the races. Now, so after you do a lot of the thinking here, you got to make sure that when you get into action and you use the action, what you do is you grab the checklist. So I have a checklist for each of the 9 stages, 3 separate checklists. I have the imagine checklist, the create checklist, and the arrange checklist, and they are all questions, or rather checks and check boxes and lists of things that you need to do at each stage to make sure that not only do you have the things, but you're also in action so that you're prepared for the next step. So you go it's a step-by-step set of checklists to fill out. So that's also useful for you. And then once you have the checklist to make sure that you have all of the things done, you start planning and you have your enhanced execution worksheet. And basically, you can call this a fancy to-do sheet, but to-do sheets, they don't capture some of the most important information that you need to get things done. Project management systems do. And what project management systems do is they have places for you to talk about how much time you have left to do something, talk about the priority of it, what goes first, what goes second, what's more important, what's less important, and the status. Did you start it? Are you working on it? Are you complete? So this enhanced execution worksheet allows you to quickly and methodically write down all of the things you need and track all of the things you need to do. And you can use this over and over, create new ones, and then you'll see on this that there is even an area in projects. So maybe you have different steps and stages that you're going through. So maybe you're in the discover phase and you say you have to do these 15 things. You put it on the checklist in the project area, you say discover, and then this is your worksheet to make sure you do all of the things in the discovery phase. And you can use this for each phase. You can use it for a particular task or set of tasks, and great. So all of these are just to make sure that you translate these abstract ideas of one stage or one goal, 3 stages and 9 steps into practical tools for you to use. And once you're practiced with those, I even have a super cheat sheet. And your super cheat sheet is basically just the workbook without all of the questions. And it asks you or tells you to think about these things. So after you've answered the questions a couple times, you've been through that, you can just use this cheat sheet to say, okay, what am I going to do now? What do I think about? What are the pitfalls? What are the things that have to make sure at this step and stage that are to make sure that you accomplish what you need there? Like I said, one goal, 3 stages, 9 steps. So this is a universal system, right? One goal, 3 stages, 9 steps. And this universal system, well, let's talk about the 3 stages as a universal system right now. This universal system happens in different areas of life. So it happens in the construction industry, the information technology industry, in how we think about nature. It happens in the military. It happens in business. And let's look at those. Now, the reason we don't think about them as, in this 3 part is because they have different words and they all pay attention to different things. So, this course, we talk about imagine, create, and execute. And the things that we create, we imagine ideas, we create systems, and we execute actions. In common vernacular, what we do is we talk about thinking about something. Hey, I'm thinking about doing X. And then, okay, once you thought about it, you say, okay, I'm going to do that. You say, oh, I'm planning to do X. So you're looking for all of the things that you need to accomplish that. And then you're in the activity phase or the operations phase where you're acting. So you got to think, plan, and act. In business and the military, we have people looking for strategies to dominate markets or gain territory during war, right? We have managers and tacticians to make sure that we have all the supplies that we need, or the workers and the soldiers have all the supplies that they need to accomplish that particular objective, right? And then on the execute level, we have the workers and operations to make sure that everything's happening according to plan, reporting to management, who then reports back to the generals and the C-suite, and have a well-oiled machine there, right? And in the construction and information technology industry, we have design, build, and operate, or in the construction industry. And then we have infrastructure, platforms, and software in the information technology industry, right? So in construction, design, build, and operate is a explicit model that public and private partnerships use. So when the government says, I want to build this, they don't build it themselves. They find a company that designs it. They find a company that creates an architecture for it. They find a company that builds it, and they find a company to run it. They might lease it out. I know I live in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania just leased out the 76, the interstate highway. So a private company now manages that. So the government doesn't have to worry about the payroll and all of the, collecting tolls and all of that. A private company does that. So in large projects, they have very, very explicit stages that they need to go through in order to consider one stage successful and complete, and then move on to the next stage. And we use some of those, some of the things that they use in their processes to make sure things go well in this system, right? And in the information technology system world, we have infrastructure, which is the cloud, they call it these days, or private servers that you have on premise or at a co-location place. You have platforms that you can rent, where you have servers that you don't have to, that you can modify, and then you have actual software that you can rent to or subscribe to, right? And then even in nature, we think about these 3 levels. We have ecosystem, forest, and trees. I'm clear that people don't usually think about the ecosystem. Everyone's like, oh, you're missing the forest for the trees. But when you look at a larger context, and now, with climate change and the problems with that, we have to think about the greater ecosystem. So you'll see that this 3 stage system sits around in multiple areas. So you going through the workbook and the checklists, you're using some very, very deep and universal patterns to think about whatever it is that you want to create, right? Cool. So let's get into that a little bit more, right? So we're going to look at the software industry. So in the software industry, not only do we have ideas, systems, and activities, or the infrastructure, platform, and what did we call it? Software. We can break those across space, time, and energy. And there are specific roles that people play in the software industry, and we'll also look at the construction industry. There's specific roles that they play that with actual job titles. And we're not going to get into actual software that does these things, but Let's check this out. So in the software industry, the business analyst tries to identify, or the business designer, sometimes you might say, is the person that tries to figure out a problem that somebody has that they can solve. Maybe you want to create graphics, but you can't. So they create Photoshop. Maybe you want to create a whole lot of documents, and you need a place to put them. That's where, Dropbox comes in. So what somebody does is say, okay, somebody has a problem and we want to create software for this, right? And then you have a market researcher. You say, okay, well, they have this particular problem. Who else has this problem? So, and how are people that have this problem dealing with it, or what workarounds do they have? How can we build something that um, has all of the good things that their little solutions have, but not all of the bad things that get them frustrated? And then once you figure all of that out, you create an infrastructure architect that says, okay, in order to solve this problem, we need to create types of software that do these types of things. It could be over close to where they are, so they might have to download something and install it on their computer, or it's over where we are, where you have platform and software as a service. So the infrastructure architect starts to think about the big solutions about how that problem gets solved for them, right? And then you have the software engineer that says, okay, cool, we're going to do this. All right. So we're going to need these types of servers to do these types of things. We need these types of software. So we use this language and not this language, because this language is about functional programming rather than object-oriented programming. And, because the business analyst said they don't do this, this is the best software for this. So we're going to do this in this language. And then we're going to scope it out and use these tools and libraries and so forth, right? And then once they figure out the whole solution, uh, then they give it to a project manager, because the software engineer's role is to kind of just lay out what the solution is, and the project managers is in charge of making sure that that gets built. It gets a little hairy because sometimes it's not so cut and dry, because the software engineer could also be a software developer. I'm clear. Um, but the roles of the person scoping out the solution and coming up with a specific way to implement them is not the same thing as the person that writes the code, right? So we have the project manager, like I just said, and what they do is they say, okay, well, we have these many people working on these many things, and we can get this part of this thing done at this time. And if you want it faster, then you're going to have to free up these resources and so forth. And this is basically what they do: is they manage the resource allocation around the people to make sure that the solution gets built according to spec, according to budget, and according to expectations, etc. And then once that's there, then you have the software developer who relies on the specs laid out by the software engineer to implement the particular solution, right? Then once they do that, they say, okay, here it is. And then you have a theme designer that says, okay, well, this button needs to be blue, this button needs to be red, it should be over here, not over there, to make sure that the layout and the interface is nice and useful for the person using it. And then you have the content administrator, or the person that writes, what the names of the buttons are, and the tutorials and so forth, and even the actual data. These are the people that are worried about the actual data and um, the words on the software and the data in the system. Could be a database administrator too, right? And then at the end of that, you have the user. This is the person that at once all of that's figured out, all of that's built, they're like, oh, okay. They open up the computer and start typing away. That's what happens in the software industry. Now, in the construction industry, we kind of have the same pattern, but we have different names, or similar names, but uh, similar names, similar roles, and we'll see. So the first is we have a designer. Now, usually a designer is an architect, right? Architects specialize in particular types of design. If you wanted to get a building built, you wouldn't go to a commercial architect for a residential build. So when somebody's an architect, yes, they can build things in general, but they've also usually focus their attention and specialize in one type of architecture. So you'll go to a residential architect for a residential building who does, ranch style houses, or, modern houses, or duplexes, whatever it is. So they're good at that particular type of design. and then they'll, create the actual blueprints for that. But once you choose the designer, you also have to figure out what happens on the land. And the surveyor is the person that will go out. In big industry, they call these geotechnical engineers. And basically, what they do is they go out and they take soil samples and they figure out how much load a soil and bedrock can take. Can you build an 8-story building on it? No, it's too close to the water, so it's muddy. You have to put pylons in or move it back. This slope is too steep for X, Y, and Z. We're so far from municipal services that you're going to have to create your own wind farm for this, like all types of things to get you connected to the infrastructure, right? Um, and then you have the architect. So once the designer and surveyor say, okay, these are the parameters that we have, the ground's going to be solid. We're going to have a hookup from municipal water and, or gas and electric. The architect says, okay, cool. The services are set. I'm going to sit down and create the building, the stuff that goes above ground or, below ground if they're doing parking garage, right? So they say, okay, these are this is how many rooms it has. These are how wide the hallways are. This is how deep the closets are, etc. They create the floor plan and the layout of the building, right? And then they give those specifications to an engineer. And the engineer says, okay, I got you. But what we're going to need is these many studs or these many girders to hold up this amount of weight. So if it's a 20-story building, they're going to do girders, right? If it's a 5-story building, they might be able to do that in all wood. And in order to do that, you need these, this thickness of plywood, these many studs, this much wiring, this much plumbing. So the engineer scopes out the, physical characteristics of the system, whereas the architect is more of a abstract characteristics of the system. So that's the space, right? They figure out what everything we need. And in something like building a car, there's the automotive engineer that builds all the specifications for the car. And then there's an industrial engineer who then builds the machines that then build the parts for the car. And then other industrial engineers build the machines that then build the machines that build the parts. So you have, these different layers. There's the product, there's the production process, and then the production process for the production process that all of the different types of engineers go through, right? And then even in the construction industry, you have a manager. Before we had a project manager, now we have a construction project manager. So they're a project manager focused specifically on the material goods and construction, boom. And then you have the builder. So in the software world, we call them the software developer. And in the physical world, we call them builders, general contractors, plumbers, electricians, master plasterers, all types of stuff. And so these are um, the different roles to get a building built, right? And once the building's built, the interior decorator, who probably already talked to the owner and the designer to figure out what type of aesthetic they want. They pick out carpets, they pick out flooring, tiles, all that stuff, and they go in and they paint and put in the furniture to make sure that everything is arranged well. And then you have the movers who, they go and install stuff and they move in all of the files, the beds, and all that stuff into the house. And then you have the occupant, right? So you'll see that we are very, very good at using this 9-step process to describe not just something that's like, oh, a couple things. These are industry standard patterns that we see across industries going on. So when we go through all of the questions of a step, or when you go through all of the questions of a step, it is not just some general stuff that I came up with. Hey, I think this is a good idea. Hey, I've researched multiple industries to make sure that the questions you answer are both flexible enough to work in any industry at any scale on any problem, but they're also specific enough that they are focused on just that one stage, right? And then we go talk quickly about business and engineering. Let's do this. We have something, have an idea or a concept, And then you go figure out, and we call it business development, and you have a business model. So business development is trying to figure out whether there are people, um, or market research, right? Uh, there are people or companies that are willing to pay for us to do this. Then you have the engineering, the supply chain, and the manufacturer. So, of course, we already talked about the engineering, and then the supply chain is looking outside of the business to figure out where you're going to get all of those parts, and ship them to whatever the factory is or the site, or what type of resources you're going to get from other companies. And then you have the manufacturer to that actually builds the thing, whether, and that manufacturer could be a cookie company, or Kraft Foods or something like that, right? Then you have the packaging. So, cookies have to go into packages, but before they are in packages on the store shelves, they are in pallets, and then in a larger thing, then they're in truckloads. So from the manufacturer, they might send a truckload to this warehouse. That warehouse then takes all the pallets off of the truck, puts it, moves it around, and takes the packaging, and then goes and then distributes that. And all of that is the delivery process. And then we'll figure out what commercial outlet it goes to. So it might go to a shopping center, right? A commercial shopping center that has multiple stores, and then to one specific retail outlet. So you'll see that these um, stages are quite literally universal. And if you answer the questions, you will be able to apply them to building a business, moving around in your industry, moving around in your company, and personal goals that you want to achieve. So this is the Imagine, Create, Execute system, and with it you can achieve all of your goals. And it's as easy as 139. One goal, 3 stages, 9 steps. Make sure you pick up the workbook.